Welcome to the SIWIKE podcast, the only podcast that shares the stuff you didn't know you needed to know about jobs, careers, and life. The SIWIKE podcast, the stuff I wish I knew earlier.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the SIWIKE Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier podcast. We're here with one of our guest hosts, Brian Bachand, who has quite an interesting background where he started off as a priest. He went into executive search, and now I guess he's a career coach and like the chief evolution officer in his company. And I'd love if you can elaborate a little bit on what you're doing now, and then we'll get into more of your backstory later on.
Absolutely. First of all, thank you so much for the invitation to be here. It's a joy to be speaking with you today and to your audience. So thank you. And so I live in Toronto, a native of the United States, but I live here now. And I founded a company called Evolutionevolution, and it's named twice on purpose. The first evolution is symbolic of our natural evolution as humans, our DNA, how a pandemic affects all of humanity. But it's really that second evolution that's most important, the evolution that we can own and how we choose to evolve both personally and professionally to be fully aligned for the greatest impact in the world. And that's where I spend my time. So I call myself the Chief Evolution Officer.
Great name.
And the reason is right now I work mostly, I have three platforms. One is one-on-one with executives, professional leaders, to help them to evolve, to help them as they transition even more deeply into their leadership to be fully aligned. That it's not just about their work, it's about the mission and the impact they can have on the people around them and in the world, and while still having great success. And I work also with organizations and running workshops, retreats, and seminars. And one of my favorite things is speaking about topics that are near to my heart.
That's amazing. So I'd love if we could step back and get a little bit more to know about you growing up. So what was Brian like as a kid? What are some like the earliest fond memories that you have? And then we'll probably go into the journey of how you got from little Brian to where you are right now.
Sure. So little Brian is the youngest of 5 children. But there's a huge age gap between myself and the oldest is 16 years. So I was one of those, oh my goodness, we're pregnant kind of babies. My parents were not planning on that. They thought they were completely done. So I kind of grew up like an only child in many ways because all my siblings were gone by the time I was in the 4th grade. And I grew up on the North Shore of Boston, about 25 miles north. And I had a great childhood. I loved elementary school. My elementary school teachers and my friends were so special. I was really fortunate, because I grew up with my parents as the main, aspect, not many siblings. I was really fortunate to do a lot of traveling with them. Mm-hmm. And that was amazing, and I just really had a great childhood growing up, and it was wonderful. Where we lived at the end of our streets was a beautiful wildlife sanctuary. And I really think that influenced me in my life because even now I still love going into nature. Okay. I'm a city guy. I live downtown in the city, but I love escaping to be in a forest and among nature. And so that's, kind of what set my life. I had a really lovely childhood, great education, great family, given a lot of opportunities, and was very happy.
That's amazing. Can you recall a couple, maybe one or two of the travel expeditions that you might have had? Because not a lot of kids, apart from the typical vacations, they didn't really get to travel with their parents. But are there any kind of memorable ones or really kind of influential ones that you encountered?
Yeah, I was really fortunate. I always remember, I think I was in like the 5th grade and it was like horrible. It was like, I don't know, February or something. It was snowing. And I remember going through the kitchen and I remember seeing on the counter in one area, there was like this information about Bermuda. And it was like these brochures and different things. And I saw the dates and it was going to be during the upcoming spring vacation. And I just got in my mind, I'm like, we're going to Bermuda. And I remember like getting all excited. My parents hadn't said anything. And so one night I kind of brought it up to my mom. I said, so are we going away? And she was like, no, like, what are you talking about? Your father and I, that's old materials. And then she came in later that night when I was doing homework, and she was joking. She said, actually, here's your plane ticket.
Nice.
And I remember going there. And we went several times, and it was just beautiful. The other time I really loved was my sister lives in Dallas, Texas. And my mother was flying down there for a few days, and it was a Friday night. And these are the days you still had like hard copy tickets. This is, when I was a kid. And I remember my father handed me the envelope and said, hey, Brian, can you just check to make sure your mom's ticket is in there for tomorrow to go to Dallas? And I said, yeah. So I did. And when I looked, there was a plane ticket with my name and his name. And he said, when we drop off your mother tomorrow at the airport, you and I are going across and we're flying to New York City for the day.
Cool.
And I remember my dad and I, we flew to Manhattan and for the whole day. And that was my first time. And I remember we went to the World Trade Center, walking on the very top. He took me out for dinner. And that was my first time in New York, where I ended up living many years later. And it just was a special moment of just myself and my dad at like, I don't know, it was like 10 or 11 years old. And it was just really special.
That's amazing. And can you tell us a little bit more about that wildlife sanctuary? I'm a little bit curious about that and how it influenced you and maybe others around you that influenced you on your ultimate career path.
Yeah, so the wildlife sanctuary, was just at the end of our street. It was like these, for those that lived around there, it was just, okay, there's a wildlife sanctuary. There's all these paths that you could go walking for hours, and in the wintertime, I would actually take my cross-country skis, walk down the street, and then go skiing through the paths. Okay. But there's this one area in there called the Rockery, that it's like a little pond, and these rock formation caves that are around there. And it was just magical. Like when you go through there as a kid, it's like these caves, and you're going around. And I loved that feeling of just you felt like you were in another world. And it just always made me feel safe. And there was a sense of excitement of being connected in nature, and just how it had its own energy. And I just always found it really peaceful and a real gift.
Cool. And is that one of the areas that kind of drew you into the priesthood? Because that seemed to me, at least from our last discussion, that was one of the main kind of career paths that you went into. How was that journey to be called by God or whatever the experience was to get there?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, it's important to understand. I think family context is important to understand. I mean, I grew up Catholic. We went to church on Sundays. I did like the religious education. I was involved with that. But, we weren't like, it wasn't like that religion was like so overpowering in the life. You know what I mean? It was a normal, balanced family. However, God and faith and religion was spoken about at home. So for example, if I was a child and I was studying for a test and I was really anxious, it would often to say, listen, like, do your best, study, be prepared, say a prayer, that's, offer it to God and know you're not alone. So there was a sense of integrating a lot of that. Mm-hmm. And I think for me, the sanctuary, there was one moment I remember, I think I was maybe in high school or something. And I remember it was Easter Sunday. And I don't know why I went for a walk there by myself. Maybe it was before like everyone was coming over to the house for the Easter dinner or something. I just wanted to get out for a little bit. And I went for a walk through there. It was a beautiful Easter Sunday. And I always remember these butterflies that came around me. Like, okay. I always remember that. And it was just beautiful, like an Easter moment. So when I think of the sanctuary going through there, it was just, there was a connection between nature and God. For myself, when I was in high school, there was a little bit of a desire to, maybe think about priesthood, but it wasn't really till university that I took more concrete steps to really pursue that formally to be enrolled in, the seminary.
Then bring us back to high school and most people that they're preparing for university, they're trying to figure out, well, do I do sciences? Do I do business? Do I do humanities? Do I do something else? Like what was the thought process in your head, and what were you considering with like the priesthood in the back of your head, I guess?
Yeah. So one of the things that early in high school that I was interested in was always medicine. I've always been like really intrigued by medicine, always like physicians and like how, the whole healthcare system. And that was something I really inspired to. And I remember there were a couple of doctors on the streets, and I remember speaking to one of our neighbors, and I remember saying to him like, oh, I'd love to, do this. And he was a surgeon. And he said, Brian, do you like to sleep? And I said,
Okay.
I do. He said, don't be a surgeon. He said, because you're going to have very early hours. But the issue was science did not come natural for me.
Okay.
Like we all have subjects that come very natural. And science was one of those I always had to spend more time on, whether biology, chemistry, whatever it might be. It was harder. And so I came to realize that science probably was not the area for me, because if you're struggling in basic biology and chemistry, you're going to have a hard time in medical school. So my focus really was on my strengths, which was writing, which was communications. And that's what I was thinking about, was in terms of communications for university, some form of communications, whether it was broadcasting or, being involved in that. That's kind of what my interest was.
And were there any influences from mom and dad or the older siblings? Because they would have gone off and they're probably in careers already.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Were any of them in kind of the business communications, the writing areas?
So my sister, who is the oldest, I have a sister, twin brothers, another brother, and myself. Okay. My sister was the oldest, actually was a professional actress, and had later opened up her own theater company and became a director. So yes, I think it was natural. It was a sense of, she was definitely in that. She also was a very savvy business person too. So she was a good combo of both. I think, my parents always supported whatever we wanted to do. I think there was also a sense of, whatever you do, be the best at it. And, I think that really came through because my father was a self-made man. He ended his career as chairman and CEO of a bank, started as, at a very young age, kind of the entry level job, and really built himself up. So he always said, whatever you do, be the best at what you do. And that was kind of the underlying aspect of our life.
Cool. I like your dad, because that's what I try to tell my kids. Like, I don't care what you end up doing, just end up being the best, whatever it is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And my dad, later, this is jumping way ahead. I know we're staying, in the back, but when I decided to resign from the priesthood and move forward, he was the first one I told. And he always made it quite clear to me, even when I went to the seminary, he goes, listen, if you decide to leave, there's never shame upon you. It's all about just making a new decision. And that's kind of how he lived his life. And he always saw that, great, okay, you want to do something else, make a right decision, think it through, but be the best at it and bring all your gifts to it. Don't shortchange yourself.
That's amazing. So walk us through. So you're interested. You have a sister that kind of, well, she didn't kind of pave the way for you, but at least showed you that it's an option. How did you ultimately choose the program that you went in, and then what happened during that process that you mentioned that you further considered the priesthood? So what was kind of that decision making process?
So one of the things that happened was at the end of high school, I had thought about it. You know what I mean? It was there. You know what I mean? A little bit. I think for myself, I think it's important to understand. I was a great kid. I did well in school. I enjoyed my life. It was great. But I think we all are spiritual beings. We all have something within us, that is drawing to be connected. And for myself as a child, I think I was always that student that really had compassion for the kid that might have been being made fun of, trying to reach out. I was very sensitive on that side, which is beautiful. And so that sense of, when I went through confirmation and really looking at that, I was in high school, I was open to it. There was something beautiful. There was something that drew me. So I did think about it at the end of high school. And there was a program that I went to the summer after high school. I went for a few weeks, and it was in Connecticut. It was through a particular organization, Catholic organization, to maybe think about it. And I knew when I was there, I'm like, this is not where I want to be. This is
Okay.
not what I want at all. And especially with that particular organization. So I decided that I just wanted to go on from a university. I was already accepted, and I went to university. And I went to a Catholic university in Ohio, and that really came to me. It really found me. I really wanted to go to university, stay in the Boston area where some of the best schools are, in the States, and love that. But I went to a small university in Ohio that fit me at the time quite well, and that was a real gift.
Cool. So walk us through kind of that process of going through school, and then what was it before or after graduation that you started considering going into the priesthood?
Yeah, so I graduated from high school, and then I went to university. It was in Ohio, and it was absolutely fabulous because I liked a few things about it. One, I liked that it wasn't in New England, so I mean, I love New England and it's beautiful, and I love Boston, but it's also very parochial, it's very parochial. And so I loved being in the Midwest, and I loved being with students that came from all over the US, and it was a different culture. And it was, just a different environment. And I had a blast. I just had so much fun there. And it was good to be away from the family, kind of, you're kind of under the safety of the umbrella. You're still connected with family, but you're kind of on your own. And I studied in Austria half of my junior year, which was wonderful. And when I was in Austria, I got involved. They had, a Catholic mass, for the students. And I got involved to be a reader. And then I got involved to do some other things. And then when I came back to the US for my senior year of undergraduate university, I still stayed involved with the chaplaincy office in Ohio. And it was at that moment, I remember a couple friends of mine said to me, Brian, have you ever thought about being a priest? Or I know you said you once had thought about in high school, you should really think about this. And so there was an advertisement posted. I remember this. It was in March of my senior year in undergrad, that there was going to be a retreat for anyone that was thinking about maybe a possible, vocation to the priesthood. Okay. And it was going to be in Pittsburgh. And I went to it. I signed up and I went to it. And that was the weekend I kind of made the decision to explore it further.
Cool. And how different was that compared to that experience was it in high school? Because that was kind of a similar type of purpose, right? You were trying to say, if you want to go into priesthood, what was different about it? Was it just because you got older and you went through experience, or was the organization and the process all different? Or
it was a lot of things. First of all, I think it was my own personal evolution at that time. I had lived more. I was still very young, obviously, right? I was 21, but there's a difference between when you're 18 to 21, almost 22. I had university experience. I lived away from home. I lived overseas. I had all these friends. I had fun. I was, there was a big social life, and it was that was different. Second, the organization that I went for that summer program was completely different than this experience. And I was looking at things in a different mindset with a little more freedom. And what I liked was it was an approach of, this is a next step. Sometimes to apply to the seminary is a next step to explore further to see if there really is something here. Sure. Where the high school experience, that summer program, was almost, they were saying, okay, you're ready to do this and move forward. And I was like, no, I don't like this. You know what I mean? It was a sense of making that decision a little bit more on your own. So it gave me the confidence, and it gave me the sense of, I was going to apply to the seminary in Boston. So it was back where my family was at, and I really wanted that. So it just aligned. And to be quite honest, it just felt right. It just intuitively felt like the right next step.
Cool. Was there a lot of decision making in that, or is it really more of a gut that said, you know what, everything feels so there wasn't really a question on either side?
So, you do think through things. One of the things that I think happens is, and this is something that I paid a lot of attention to in my life, that when there's a movement, whether it's towards looking at a new job, a relationship, making a decision, there's usually synchronicities of things that happen around that. Mm-hmm. And I always see those as small kind of winks, so to speak, of the universe saying, okay, you're going in the right direction. Things keep happening. You often hear people say like, oh my gosh, I can't believe, this person just said this to me, or that just happened. Well, okay, well, it's happening for a reason.
Right.
So there was some of those things that happened, but it was also, it's not just that you call up the seminary and you say, I want to go to the seminary. There was a several-month application process. And each one of those steps helped to kind of affirm that, okay, this is the next step. So, you had to write essays, you had to get recommendations, you had to go for psychological testing, you had to have interviews. And each one of those steps just kind of kept affirming, okay, this is the right next thing to do. And that helped me to move forward in confidence to embrace that. And I approached the seminary as this is the next step to test it, rather than going into saying, I'm going to be a priest. No, I'm going in to explore it and let's see where it keeps going.
Cool. And if you were to kind of reach out to folks that are interested in taking a look at vocations and exploring that path, what are some of the things that you would recommend to them? Or is it really just following the steps, like the 7 parts of the application? Is it literally just that, or are there other things that you would have, if I had gone back, I might have done this or that?
Yeah. So, if I had to, this is always the great question, right? Is it, what is something you could tell your younger self? So,
Yeah.
What would you say? So I think for myself, I think the biggest aspect is this, that I, like I said earlier, had a sense of spirituality, kind of very in tune to others, a sense of maybe, connection with, I call it the divine, that connection there. I think the difference is when I was a child, I just thought, okay, that means you have to be a priest because spirituality was connected to religion, which was connected to the Catholic Church. But that's not the case. It can also mean being connected to having now, like I have a meditation practice and how I live that out in a very different way. So I would encourage anyone that's kind of maybe feeling that, or they feel they're looking at that, is to say, there are other ways to live that out. So be open to that. And I think our family environment can have an impact on how we think we should live things out. So that's not to say I regret in any way, shape, or form what I did. It was magnificent and beautiful. But I realize now it's a wider perspective of how I would look at that. But I encourage anyone, pursue it, but also be open to maybe some of the other paths that might be there.
Cool. And if you kind of walk us through some of the magnificence that happened during that process. So now you've gone through several stages, and now you're on your way to become a priest. What was that process like? And then the priesthood itself, how was that as kind of a career path?
Yeah, sure. So I think, to kind of the behind the scenes view, the seminary is interesting. For me, it was 5 years. So you get a graduate degree. It was a rigorous academic formation. The seminary in Boston at the time is also connected in a collaboration with Harvard Divinity, Boston University, Boston College. So I was able to take graduate courses in all of those places. Cool. But I lived at the seminary, had courses there. There was formation. There was definitely spiritual practices there, et cetera. And you also had pastoral work each year through the seminary. My first assignment in the seminary at 22, I was sent to the women's state prison.
Oh, no.
And I found out later that I was sent there because I was one of the younger students and it's a tough assignment. Okay. So they try and test, they try and test you out. But I really excelled when I was there. Like I ended up, teaching, engaging these different programs that I continued on throughout the seminary, going there even after the assignment concluded. And then as a priest, I still went back there, to help out, which was really amazing. And I did hospice work. And so when it became time to be ordained, I was 27, which is still young. I had a deep sense of this was my path, like an alignment with what I felt God was calling, and also to be of service. And I felt one of my gifts in that was I was very real, like I was very human. So I think I was diocesan. So I enjoyed, going out for dinner. I enjoyed seeing people. I enjoyed being part of life. And I think that is what made it a little bit different, that I really, I wasn't some far off person. I was involved, and that was great. So I was sent to a parish the first 4 years. And what I loved is that it was a young community. I did tons and tons of weddings. Like I could have been like in Vegas, you know what I mean? Like it was wonderful to be part of families at that time, which then led to, doing lots of baptisms, also being there for people who were in very difficult moments, whether in death, going through a crisis. And that was a real privilege. And those were the things that I really loved in that kind of frontline work as a priest. And then I got a phone call on a Thursday night, 4 years later, to come in the next day for a meeting. They wanted to speak about an opportunity. Okay. And I was told that the new cardinal had selected me to be his new private secretary, which would mean like chief of staff. And when you get that role, your life changes. And, because you're now being groomed most times for a lot more leadership. And I lived with the cardinal. And when he went to the Vatican, I was at the Vatican. We had numerous trips there and stayed there. When he went to go meet with the Pope, I was there. When he went to the White House, I was there. And that was an incredible global learning and supporting a leader, and also bringing out more gifts within me, and also coming to embrace what was then bubbling in my heart as well.
Cool. So tell us a little bit about that bubbling. So how did that transition? Because we had a spoiler at the beginning where you went out of the priesthood.
Right. but surprise! It's a shocker. It's a shocker. Yeah.
But what was that kind of bubbling? When were like the first kind of inclinations that what I thought I signed up for, or maybe it did exactly what you wanted to, but then you want to do something else? Yeah. What were those first moments like?
So I'm a firm believer, for anyone who's listening, one of the gifts in life as we keep evolving is that where you are is exactly where you need to be. And that's what's preparing you for what's next. And so the gift of getting that opportunity to work for the cardinal was exactly what I needed and where I needed to be. So first of all, it aligned with my strengths, and I loved that. But what I started realizing is that it was much more of a kind of an executive role. I wasn't saying mass in the parish. I wasn't visiting the sick. I wasn't, doing those things. I was coordinating and being master of ceremonies for an event. I was going to meetings. I was traveling to the Vatican with the cardinal, coordinating schedules there and being present and going to different ceremonies. And I enjoyed it. And I also realized that I didn't miss what originally drew me to become a priest. Mm-hmm. I wasn't missing any of that, but I really was enjoying that aspect. At the same time, I also came to realize that maybe from doing all those weddings and seeing people, that I wanted to love another person. That the life of being a priest is beautiful. But I think when I look back, I was very fixated on becoming a priest, following, like going through the seminary, achieving, continued, and then later came to realize that I also wanted to be authentic to who I was. Sure. I was, a gay man, that I wanted to be free. I didn't want to, live in the shadow of that. I also wanted to love another person freely and bring my gifts out to the world. And I knew that I could do that with ease and with joy. And that's when I started to realize I needed to take a look at what was bubbling up inside. And so I did.
So tell us more about that exploration or that decision making. There's probably a bit of back and forth and like compare and contrast and things like that. What were some of the key factors that led to the ultimate decision that you said, I have to leave the priesthood?
Yeah. So I think the first is this, and this is something I say, and I speak about it all the time. So for anyone that's listening and might be feeling something bubbling in their heart, whether it's personal or professional, this is the number one question to ask yourself. What do I desire? Because within the desire is always truth. And that truth will never, ever lie to you. Our opportunity is to be open to what that truth is. And so I had that desire that, wow, I really think I want to live a different kind of life. I don't want to be Father Brian. I want to be free. I want to be truly authentic to who I am. I was kind of a late bloomer, but I wanted that. And so when I knew that and I was able to embrace that within my heart and not be afraid of like, okay, there's something here. The first thing I did is I wanted to work with someone professionally to kind of test it out. You know what I mean? Just to help me unpack it. Because oftentimes people, can make drastic decisions. It's like a work. Oh my gosh, I hate the job. I don't like the boss. This is awful. And then it's the wrong decision because they haven't consciously taken the time to unpack why they want to leave. What's the desire? So I worked with this wonderful psychologist for almost 9-10 months. And he was Jewish. And I say that on purpose. I wanted someone who was not in the church. I didn't want anybody who was Catholic. I wanted someone neutral. I wanted almost someone who was almost atheist that just could look at things objectively. And he was amazing. And he helped me unpack why I wanted to leave. And also when you do that, it unpacked a lot of expectations that I had placed on myself, family expectations, my fear of what would other people think, what would I do for work, what does this mean, what all these things. And by talking it out and looking at that, it cleared. So when I went to the cardinal many months later and told him that I wanted to resign and take a leave and move forward, and then when I told family and friends, most were supportive, but there were some that were not, and they were actually quite aggressive and mean-spirited in many ways in how they responded back. It didn't deter me. It didn't hold me back because I had done the inner work. And I think that's the most important aspect for anyone that wants to make a career change, a relationship change. You have to do the inner work, because when you do that, then you're free and you have clarity to do the external next steps. And that's what I did to help me be able to move forward with ease and clarity.
Cool. Do you have some suggestions in terms of how one might be able to do some of that inner work before they make these kind of big decisions? Because a lot of folks, they do career switches, maybe not as drastic, but still of a similar level. What is some of that inner work that helps you and could help others?
Sure. So the first thing I always tell everyone is this: hold your cards close. One of the biggest things that people do is they talk too much. Like I'm an extrovert, so obviously you can tell I love chatting with you today and having a conversation. However, when it comes to making a very big decision or a change in your life, it's important to be selective on who you share the information with and why.
Right.
Because you want people that can be unconditional. You want people that can give you insight. But if you tell too many people, they're going to keep asking you questions, and you may not be prepared to answer them. And all it does is cause self-doubt within yourself, thinking, oh, they asked me that. I don't know what that means. And so I would say right away, be selective in who you share the information with. That's number one. And maybe that means working with someone professionally or someone like myself, as a coach to help unpack that. But that's important. Number two, I think it's very important to also embrace the gift of time. That sometimes we try and control the outcome, of saying, I need to make this decision because, when year end comes, I want to be out of the job. I'll stay on for the bonus, but I don't want this. Well, no, sometimes you have to release the timeline. It's important to have a time frame, but I would recommend to people to say, you know what? I'm thinking in the next 6 months, I'd like to move on something, but also embrace that it may take longer or it may take less. I think that's very, very important. And the third piece is this. I would say really spend some time and, write down, what do I desire? And every day, just jot down some things that come to your mind, and don't, and release the outcome. Don't try and plan from everything, but sometimes just say, what do I desire? Be brutally honest. And also recognize what might be holding you back if there's a fear attached to something that you're seeking. And looking at that, because that will indicate the fear or any of the blockages that might be there indicate so often what you need to do next.
Cool. So you've done the inner work and you made the decision to leave. Some people responded positively, some people not so much. And now you're on this new path. What are kind of the first few days, weeks, months on there where now you're in uncharted waters? What does that feel like?
It was amazing. To be quite honest with you, the hardest part of, leaving for me, and I think for anyone who's listening that has either made a decision to leave a job and, it's been a toxic environment. They've made the decision to leave, but they're staying on for a few more weeks. They gave their notice. Sometimes those weeks before you leave are the most challenging, right? But once you leave, it's great. Same for me. So for me, once I was able to say I'm leaving, I secured a great job in New York City. And once I left, I remember driving out of the cathedral with all my belongings and drove to New York. And I had a job, I had everything lined up. And there was such a sense of relief. It really was. So for me, it was exciting. I found it very exciting, and I never had any doubt of what was happening. And I think for me, one of the biggest moments that confirmed that I had done a lot of deep inner work, that I had peace, I was in the right place, was I landed a job with the American Cancer Society in New York. I was a director, and they were so great. They waited for me to start in February. I started on a Monday. That Monday night, I spoke with my dad. He had been ill. He had cancer, but he was doing really well through treatment. And the next day, Tuesday, that afternoon, I got a phone call when I was at work that my father died unexpectedly.
Oh, no.
And so there I am. I remember I'm in New York City. I've been gone 10 days. And now my father has passed away unexpectedly. And I have to go to my new boss and say, guess what? I have to go back to Boston.
Oh, no.
And I had to go back. And, it's quite a moment, right? You've just left. You now have to go back. You have to face different people, et cetera. But you know what? I had such peace. And I knew that when I was there and went through the funeral, and I was excited to go back to New York. And I remember at the end of that, I'm like, that's where I need to be. And I never doubted that. And to me, that was just a great gift as well. I know I use that term a lot, gift, but it's true, because it is a gift that I realized this is where I need to be. And that was my new life. But there definitely were moments. The hardest part for me was when people would say things, especially when I started the job. Oh, where were you before you started working here? And it's like, well, where do I begin? So trying to come up with your elevator speech in like 1 minute to kind of articulate, that took some time as well. But it was actually more exciting than anything.
Yeah, we might, if you're willing to come back for a future episode, talk about in more detail about like the job search, starting off as a priest, because talk about like transferable skill sets that you're not in corporate or work at all, but in a totally different context. But so walk us through kind of that job that you started, hopefully enjoyed, and then I know you went into like executive search, and then now obviously with evolution. What are some of the kind of key milestones along that path?
Yeah. So I think for myself, it was interesting, and it would be great. I'd be happy to come back, because I do a lot of work about transferable skills. How do you do that, and all of that? And so I landed in the world of fundraising and philanthropy. It wasn't something I was like, oh, that's what I want. It kind of found me and it fit. And it really fit well. And for what I wanted to do, I went on to become executive director at NYU Medical, and then executive director at University of Toronto for the Faculty of Medicine, and then got recruited to become a partner in recruitment for a couple of years. And I really have to say, all of those positions were amazing because it was about leadership, it was about relationships, and for me, it was about impact, with a team. So, because I led, teams. And so that really was an incredible opportunity when I was a partner in recruitment that I started to ask that same question again. What do I desire? And I desired to bring it all together. That sense of helping leaders, whether they're executives or they're just their first job, help them to be fully integrated inwardly so they can make the greatest external success in their life professionally. And I love working with people who are decision makers. I've supported them. I've been one, because those individuals really can transform an entire culture in people's lives. And that's why I, move forward to establish evolution, to bring my expertise all together in a new way to help them evolve to the highest level of themselves.
That's amazing. And again, we might have you back for even more details on all of that. But I love, before we leave, could you share some of kind of any general SWIKE, the stuff I wish I knew earlier, or I don't know, any of the key milestones that you encountered, if you could reach back to, I guess, younger or slightly older Brian or whatever Brian.
Yeah, sure. Whatever age, pick a Brian.
Pick a Brian. Yeah. What are kind of the key ones you would share?
Yeah. So without a doubt, I would say, it's something I would go back to and, just affirm on a positive level that it's all about relationships. And I cannot say that enough. The success to being in New York City and raising millions in revenue, especially during a huge economic downturn when I was there in 2008, 2009, and raising the most, it was all about relationships and cultivating really good networks. I love being on social media. I love connecting online and, just like how we did. It's amazing. And that is where we're at in the world, and that will continue. But you also have to nurture relationships authentically and engage with them. And I can't stress that enough, because that continues to be the hallmark. People will engage with you. They will buy your services. They will hire you, often not because that you're the best in the industry. You obviously will bring something, but because of how you connect with them.
Sure.
How you listen, how you follow up, how you bring a presence. And that is something that I would just continue to affirm to my younger self, and for everyone else, that is so essential. I think the other aspect too is, definitely always be open. Always be open. Be open to opportunities. Be open to evolving. When opportunities come along, sometimes we get stuck and to think, oh, what would that happen? We place a lot of self-judgment on ourselves. Be open. Just keep being open. And that will always lead you to even greater success.
That's amazing. What came to mind for the first one about relationships, it's really about trust, right? So that person that connects with you, do you feel that they can do the job, but not even that? Will they have your intents in mind, or are they doing it just for a paycheck, or that sort of thing, right? And the open to opportunities. Yeah, sometimes life takes you where you least expect. So sometimes you need to listen to the signs around and ask yourself that question. Now, what do you desire? Maybe
exactly.
on an ongoing basis, on a continual basis, to say, it is what I'm doing today what I desire, and see where that takes you. And it might be an obvious answer, or it might be something totally different. So
absolutely.
I think that's amazing advice. And if folks would want to connect with you, where could they do so? And then what are some future aspirations for Brian and Evolution?
Sure. So first of all, welcome to hear from anyone. A couple platforms you can reach out to me. Definitely very active on LinkedIn. So feel free to send me a connection there. Say you heard the interview here on this wonderful podcast. And I'm very good. Like I always follow up, like within 24 hours, like or less. I'm very good about connecting. My website is www.evolutionevolution.com. It's going through an evolution right now to be all updated. So what you see is exactly not where it's at, but that's okay. But you can connect through me there. I'm also on Clubhouse, so you can connect there. And, future aspirations, one of the biggest aspirations I have for evolution is I really desire and will move forward in creating retreat formats for leaders to come together. Because I just find that when you create space, that you come together, that you give yourself that time, that's where you're more open. You're more open to exploring where things are at. And so this would definitely be a collaborative effort with others and in conversations and looking at that because it's powerful. And I think if there's anything from the pandemic that has showed us, it's two things. One, leaders are more awake, to use a term that's very common right now. And so they're more open to wanting to do some of that inner work so they can really be even more effective in their leadership. And a retreat is an incredible environment to be able to do that in different formats with hiking, meditation, breathing, seminars. And I want to be part of that. And it's something I love and I want to create that. I want to have a format for people to evolve in that setting. So that's one of my biggest aspirations.
That's amazing. And so we're looking forward to anybody who wants to attend one of those retreats and at a leadership level, kind of get to know themselves and other people more. And thanks so much again, Brian, for joining us. And hopefully we'll have you back for a future episode.
My pleasure. And great questions. Thank you so much. It was like a journey through life there. So you brought up a lot of nice memories. I've been thinking about the sanctuary all since we've been talking. So that was really nice. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks a lot, Brian.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on the SIWIKE Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier, the podcast. If you like the podcast, please subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you found this podcast. And if you can give us a review, that would be very appreciated. Feel free to contact me on LinkedIn at Luki Danu, LUKIDANU, and the same on most social media platforms. And I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks. Bye.